Alright, the bit is over. Let's properly address the elephant in the room. I updated my sona design. Or made one, I guess. I also updated my background. Just slightly. Gave it some more dimension. Let me know what you think about it. I've had a couple of different personas over the last few years. None that really stuck. I don't particularly like drawing myself. Never have. I don't think it's interesting. I mean, I stare at her plenty enough. It's the same thing when I write. That whole write what you know advice has never been appealing to me. Like, sure, I absolutely agree that it's a good advice for good writing. I, however, don't particularly aspire to be a good writer. I would say that I more so write for my own enjoyment, but really it's more like my characters are acutely aware of the fact that I am the sole reason of their existence, and so they have developed an equal amount of life-controlling power over me, which, fair enough. No, art and writing are simply a part of me, always in the back of my mind. I spent most of my formative years developing skills purely for those two hobbies, and it really shaped my brain as it developed. And I like to use art to see things from perspectives I otherwise never would have. I very much enjoy to look at life from a bird's eye view, from a distance. I don't need to be all up in it all the time in order to experience it and to enjoy it. There's something very quite calming about anonymity. And maybe that sounds a bit sad, but I just don't need to see myself in art most of the time. I know who I am, what my life is, and I can wax poetic about it plenty enough in my journal. And then that's that. I've started drawing myself much more in recent years, which is a side effect from being in fandom spaces on the internet. So many self-insert prompts that I ultimately wasn't very interested in, but still really enjoyed to take part in. And then came the era of TikTok, where I started drawing little sprites of myself, since I had decided not to show my face before I turned 18, which I held myself to. I was a very internet-safe child, but I guess this is the evolution of that. So, I wanted a sona. And like I said, I'd had some in the past that just weren't quite it. I tried just drawing myself as I was, and myself as I wanted to be. Neither worked. I was always changing things. I mean, why do you think my profile picture is of a random drawing of a fish and not of myself? No, it's not because I go by Finn. That is actually a complete coincidence. It's partly because the drawing just happened to be round and fit in that dimension, and partly because a mutual I looked up to reposted it, which subsequently made it pop off well enough to convince me that it was good enough to just represent me as a whole for the next 3 years. Oh, and because it's blue and orange. That was the whole reason I made it. I just frickin' loved blue and orange back then. Not quite as much nowadays, but I think I have just cemented that palette deep enough into my identity for it to have deserved its place in my branding or whatever. I mean, really deep into my identity. Anyway, I knew that I didn't want to change my profile picture. I'm attached to the little guy, and so I considered many ways to include him. This brought me to my last persona, which only ever made one YouTube appearance before I knew I had to change it. Don't get me wrong, I do really love this design. I know some artists think object heads are pretty amateur since you skip out on drawing the face, but I love object heads. The face is the easiest part anyway. It's the body that's hard to draw for me. The problem I quickly discovered with object heads, however, is that they're very hard to emote with, which is a problem for a character whose job it is to emote. I very quickly decided that I needed to just remake the whole thing because it just would not work. The absolute first thing I did was write down a list of things that I felt made me me. I noticed that I didn't like the lack of glasses on my object head design, so clearly those were something I needed to include. I've also tended to draw myself with a sort of Frankenstein-ish forehead scar, which I already knew wasn't going anywhere. 1, because I love Frankenstein, and 2, because it would allow the character to open up her brain and show her head, which tied into the whole scatterbrain thing. That's a very old vision, but one I do feel very at home with. It felt very me. Though it has to be said, I have not actually drawn a reaction sprite like that yet. It will happen just later. It's a matter of when. okay? Not today. Drawing's hard, guys. I've also recently been very into short dresses, specifically 60s dresses and the medieval revival dresses. Those ultimately did not quite end up working out, but I did decide to have her wear one of my favorite button-ups that I own in real life. Some other details that felt obvious were the fish hook earrings, sharp teeth, and the white streaks in the hair. Do I have any of those? No, but I did both consider bleaching my hair like that and piercing my ears, so that's close enough. Plus, I absolutely take any opportunity to draw a fishhook earring. That is something that has persisted since my mermaid days back in 2019. So, on some level, it's also something that feels very me. The hooks stay. And, well, I do actually have some grey hairs. Just a couple, so they're not really visible at all, but at 13 years old, I had about as many grey hairs as my 50-year-old mother. So, that's fun. Stress may be destroying my body, I fear. Good thing I don't have a fear of growing old. Anyway, point is, it also feels very me and just looks kinda sick. Talking about hair, I started drawing this design before I had gotten my hair cut. Now I'm nearly due for another one. Funny how things work out. Then, of course, the lighthouse tie. Because of my earlier mentioned mermaid days and a bunch of fallen domino bricks, I have developed quite an obsession with lighthouses. I have considered making this tie for myself in real life for at least a year now. I needed to include it. It was like the most important thing of this whole design. I freaking love this tie, man. Lastly, I decided to make myself into a little sea creature. Mostly just to keep the theme going. It's fun, it's nostalgic, it works. And to further adhere to the color palette, I also made myself a ginger, which really doesn't feel as far-fetched as it probably should. I have pretty dark brown hair, but that's pretty much it. Every other detail is based on how I look in real life, sometimes exaggerated like the freckles. So, with this design all figured out, I was free to work on the sprites. I finished the design 2 months before I started using it, though I did kind of soft launch it beforehand, simply because I was excited to draw it. But finally, now, yet another month later, I finally have enough faces and poses to call it mostly done. The final stage of this was just to line up all the poses to connect easily to the faces and glasses. I imagined I was gonna save all the layers individually and edit it together in the actual editing for the video. But after just using them once, I could immediately tell that was never gonna happen. The easier way was just to download the set together each time I wanted a certain sprite. Firstly, it would be easier to manage in the editing app since I could move the sprite around without worrying about the body not lining up with the face. Secondly, it was just way easier to grab what I needed when I needed it directly from the Procreate file. And that way it also wasn't filling up my iPad more than necessary. I delete the sprite PNGs after the video is done to save space, though that's just what felt the easiest for me. Definitely not a one-size-fits-all. And that's it. You've already seen the sprite in action, and will continue to do so. That is, if you stick around. But either way, here's a little overview of all the different assets. I hope y'all like this design. I really do. It feels a lot like me, which I was scared it wouldn't. I'm sure I'll grow out of it someday, already probably have in ways. But it does very much feel like one version of myself that once existed. A lot of who I am today can be traced back to 2019, and so can a lot of the elements of this design. One day, I'll have other milestones to refer back to, but for now, I'm happy with this depiction of myself. Bye.